So this would be for the first part of your density lab calculations, trying to figure out the density of the pycnometer. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to put this abbreviation mass P for mass pycnometer. And I wouldn't put this in my formal report, these abbreviations that you're going to see me use, but I'm going to put them in here just to save space on the spreadsheet. So I weighed this, and my first trial I got this, and let's say these were my data for the first trial. Well, each of the uncertainties on the scale was 0.01, and so my abbreviation here, I usually like to use D, like delta, like an uncertainty, D mass of the pycnometer, and in absolutes. So each spot of the scale, it was 0.01. I'm going to put equals 0.01, and equals 0.01, and I can put equals 0.01. So I have all those entered in. Well, before I move on, I like to get the percentage uncertainty as well. I may or may not need it later on, but I'm just going to get it either way. So I'll put D mass pycnometer and put the percentage. And so I'm going to press the equal sign, and that equals this value divided by the total, and then I'm going to use the star key over 8 times 100. And I'll hit enter. And what I can do now is I can do a fill down, because it's the same for each of these, the same type of calculation. So I'll just left click on that square, and my cursor, I'm not clicking any buttons, I'm just moving it to the lower right corner, and it turns into that plus. When it's done that, one thing I can do is I can click and hold my left mouse button and drag it down. This is called a fill down. And when I let go, it does the exact same calculation for each of those. See, this cell here is referencing saying, okay, B2 divided by A2 times 100. This cell here is B3 divided by A3 times 100, and so on. It's just a quick way to do it. Okay, I'm going to enter in my mass of the pycnometer plus the water, and here's the values I got. And I use the same scale on that, so my uncertainty on this is going to be exactly the same thing. Now if I type and it goes out of the box like this, what I can do to resize a column quickly is I move my mouse just right in between the two, and I get the little double arrows there when I do that. I just moved it in between. And if I double click with my left mouse button, it'll resize it for me then to the widest amount of text I have there. And this also was 0.01. And if I want, I can take 0.01, let's see, I'll put that in. I'm going to get the absolute uncertainty on this as well, just in case I might need it later on. So I'm going to type equals, click on my absolute, divide it by the total amount, and then I'll put times 100. And then I will fill that down, and I've got all the percent uncertainties for all those mass of pycnometer plus water values. And then lastly, it's time to do some calculations. And so the mass of the water that I put into the pycnometer, well, I don't have a table for that. So that's going to equal the mass of the pycnometer plus the water. And I'm going to subtract off the mass of just the plain pycnometer. And I'll hit enter, and I will fill those down, because it's the same type of calculation for each one. The uncertainty on that, to get this 26, I had to do some subtraction. I had to subtract this number minus this number. The rule for uncertainties would be to add the uncertainty. So it's going to equal the uncertainty here plus the uncertainty here. And I should get 0.02 for all of them to make that work. Again, I'm going to just get the percentage of it just in case. You never know if I need it. Oops, I forgot to put the W in here. Sure that works. There we go. And that's going to equal my absolute uncertainty divided by the total mass times 100. And same thing, I will fill that down. It'll keep track of all that for me. Okay. Lastly, I need to get the volume of the water and its uncertainties, because the volume of the water is going to be the volume of the pycnometer. But to make sure this happens, I need to put the density of the water for the day. So I'll put D, maybe I'll put density of water. And I looked it up, and I'm going to put in all the values, 0.9989, let's say. That's what it was. And so to get this volume, the volume of the water is going to equal the mass of the water divided by the density. So I can do equals the mass of the water divided by the density. And I get a value. But if you fill down here, you're going to run into a problem. So watch what happens when I fill down. I get this divide by 0 error. So I can go back and see, okay, this one is G2 divided, it highlights it for me when I click in here. It says it's G2, which I want, divided by the density, which is what I want. And I get the right number. But when I go to this one, look what it's doing. It's taking the 26.2, which we want, but it's dividing by the next box down, which it thinks is 0. So it's like dividing by the 0 that's there. So I could write, the density 3 times, but I'm going to show you another trick. Let me just click on this one real quick just so you can see. Then this one filled down and it went to the right mass, but it's on the wrong cell for that. So I'm going to show you a trick on this. Let me just erase this real quick. I'll clear these. Maybe delete cells. I'm not really sure. Sure, shift them up or something. Okay, anyway, I got rid of them. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do equals the mass, which I want, and every time I fill down, I want it to use the new mass in the next line down. And I'm going to hit divide it. But the density, I want it locked. I always want to use this density regardless of whether I'm in this row, or this row. So what I'll do is I'll click on it, and it's just like what I had before, but I'm going to use a hotkey, the F4 button. The F4 button puts these dollar signs in. And I'll tell you, if you have trouble with that, if on the Mac, I think you might have to type like Alt F4 or Command F4 or something to make that work. Let's just say you can't do that and you click it on here. You can always go up to this bar up here and you can like manually type in the dollar signs to make it work as well. But F4 is just a quick way to do it. That means it's locked that cell. So now when I fill down, I get this. And notice it stayed C6 on this one, C6 on this one, and C6 on that one. So now I have the volume of the water for each one. If I want the absolute volume uncertainty, I probably won't get that right away. In fact, I'll probably get the percentage one but first because I did some division. So I got to add the absolutes, or sorry, add the percentages. So this is going to equal the mass percentage uncertainty. I'm sorry, wrong one. Of the water. Sorry, this one right here, of the water. Because I use the mass of the water, so I use the water's percentage. Plus the uncertainty on this density, which is 0. So I could put plus 0 in here, really, if I want. I don't have to put plus 0. It doesn't do anything. So it's just going to add that up, and I'll fill those down. And if I want to get that back to absolutes, what I will do is it equals the percentage. We divide the percentage by 100, and I will times it by, again, the times is the star above the 8 key, times it by the actual value, and we can fill that down. And so now I've got my part 1 calculations all done. But I might want 2 things that might help a little bit. First, I want to know now what's the average volume here, because that's going to be the average volume of the pycnometer. It's the same as the average of the water. So I can actually average these real easily. I can type in equals average, and I'll hit open parenthesis, and then I can just left click and hold all the numbers I want to average, those 3 right there, and I'll hit equals, and it gives me the average volume of that. And another number I'm going to want for part 2 is the average mass of the pycnometer. So I'll put this in, average mass of the pycnometer, and same thing, I'll type equals, type in the word average, open parenthesis, and I'm just going to average those 3 numbers right there. And now I'm all done with part 1, and I will save this here, and I'll actually just leave it. Maybe I'll put part 2 down here on the bottom of the sheet. But that's it for the first video.